All right, so as Matt said, my name is Trevor McKay. I'm a software engineer at Red Hat. I'm a contributor to the RAD Analytics IO project and also a member of the Kubeflow community. We've talked about Kubeflow in this meeting a few times earlier this year, and today I'm going to give you a high-level update about what is happening with Kubeflow. So for the benefit of those watching on YouTube, or for those of you that may have missed earlier presentations, we'll start with a very quick recap of what is Kubeflow. We'll take a look at how the community has grown up and what's going on there, what the roadmap for the rest of the year looks like and release plans. And then we'll take a look at a question of particular interest for OpenShift Commons, which is how is it fitting to OpenShift? Very important question for us. Additionally, I want to point out just a few particular areas where I think OpenShifters and folks from RAD Analytics IO in particular can contribute. And finally, if time allows, we'll see a simple demo of the workflow on OpenShift, proving that all the bits come along very nicely. Also, if you haven't seen Jeremy Louie's presentation from KubeCon EU in early May, I posted a link here. I'll add the slides too to the meeting notes afterwards. This is a great presentation that goes in more depth. I encourage you to check it out. And when I asked Jeremy for up-to-date roadmap resources, he directed me to this presentation. So it's very relevant and pretty fresh. Also, just a logistical note, if I say anything that contradicts Jeremy about roadmap, he's right. Okay, so you may have seen this slide before. What is Kubeflow? In a nutshell, it's about building portable machine learning solutions using Kubernetes. I'd also add it's about lowering the bar to entry for deploying machine learning apps and taking a lot of the orchestration burden off the shoulders of developers and data scientists. So you can look at Kubeflow from a couple of different perspectives. From a community perspective, it's about bringing together data scientists, researchers, developers, PMs, etc., in the same space to produce a machine learning platform on Kubernetes. A community like this is necessary, as Jeremy notes, that because building a platform is just too big to tackle alone. I think that's a very important point. There's so much that goes into this beyond just training models. From a technical perspective, Kubeflow is about leveraging Kubernetes technology and especially recent features like custom resource definitions to create a portable, scalable, extensible ML platform for the whole world. So what does that platform look like? Well, you all know that building a model is central, but there are all these other pieces to do, and you may have seen this slide before as well. These are all the tasks that you need to develop and manage a machine learning solution and get it into production. The ultimate goal of Kubeflow then is to provide tools that deliver the functionality in each of these boxes. Right now, in the 0.1 release, the tool set essentially covers tasks directly associated with training, building, and serving models, but future releases will gradually fill in the other boxes, and I have a little more to say about that later. So how is the community doing? Well, honestly, the growth has been amazing. It's very exciting to see an open source project like this just take off in a matter of months. So at KubeCon, for instance, there were 8 talks touching directly on Kubeflow, which is amazing. Here are some stats. I would bet dollars to donuts that most of these numbers have probably increased in the last month. Lots of members, 20 plus organizations involved, lots of PRs. It's really quite incredible. Beyond just the numbers, there are now regular bi-weekly community meetings The meetings are sort of split between time zones on alternating Tuesdays so that we've got the broadest coverage possible over the globe. If you really want to get a feel for what's going on in the community at a detailed level, I'd highly recommend attending some of the community meetings. In addition to just discussion of what's going on, there's usually a great demo from somebody in the community so you can see how the technology is being applied. I'd also note that the Kubeflow GitHub org now has expanded to 16 different repositories covering core components, testing infrastructure, the website, community and proposals, some examples. This is also an awesome place to spend some time and dig into what's being developed. All right, so here is a high-level roadmap for the rest of the year. The 0.1 release came out in early April with core components around training and serving models. The 0.2 release is slated for June end. That is this month for those of you on YouTube. And the goal is to have a 1.0 release by the end of the year with production-worthy components. There's an additional goal to actually move eventually to a quarterly release cadence going forward. That may mean that there's a 0.3 somewhere between June and December, but don't quote me on that. All right, so how is Kubeflow fitting to OpenShift? A very relevant question. Well, the short answer is very, very well. Given some of the Kubeflow core principles, this shouldn't be a surprise at all. It's dedicated to being Kubernetes native, which means it has hard dependencies on Kubernetes APIs, and the community makes a promise that it will run everywhere that Kubernetes runs. That's the goal. So naturally, since OpenShift is a Kubernetes distribution for the enterprise, this works out just fine. However, since OpenShift has RBAC enabled out of the box and strives to be safe and secure by default, there are a few configuration commands you need to do in order to set up users and projects for installing and running Kubeflow. We need to give the user installing Kubeflow permissions to do things like register custom resources. We need to modify security contexts and roles for service accounts in each project where we'll run it. But it's really just a couple of commands. We'll see this later in the demo. And aside from that, everything works out of the box. All right, so it's no surprise there is a ton of stuff to contribute to in general in the Kubeflow community, but I've called out just a couple things here that I think might be of particular interest to this audience, to OpenShifters and folks involved in RAD Analytics IO. First of all, there's a proposal being worked on currently for supporting multiple images for Kubeflow components based on different distros. So naturally, in OpenShift, we're interested in this because we think that the safety, security, and reliability of CentOS as a base image is a perfect complement to the safety, security, and reliability built into OpenShift from its foundation. Secondly, having OpenShift-oriented images may possibly help us ameliorate the need for some of the kinds of extra config I called out in the previous slide. But this proposal needs to be fleshed out. It's not finished yet and presented to the community, and obviously all the work to support this needs to be done. So this would be a great place to contribute. Another possible place for OpenShifters to contribute is in making the CI tests run on OpenShift infrastructure as part of the normal workflow. Obviously, if we want to have confidence that Kubeflow will continue to work flawlessly on OpenShift, we should have OpenShift infra in the test workflow, and there's work to do there. Lastly, and this is kind of near and dear to my heart as a member of RAD Analytics IO, we can look at having Apache Spark CRDs added as Kubeflow components sometime in the future. If we recall the machine learning task diagram from earlier, there's this top line that deals with data handling, ingestion, engineering, pre-processing, etc. Apache Spark is a performant distributed processing framework. It has a pretty broad feature set, and it can do a lot of things. And I think it would be particularly suited to filling in these tasks from the top row of that diagram. So we'd like to work towards that as well. I will mention that currently Google has a Spark CRD that is conceptually based around Spark application management, and Rad Analytics IO has a new Spark CRD that is conceptually based around cluster management and allows for long-running clusters or ephemeral clusters. So hopefully we can move towards having these Spark capabilities as part of the standard Kubeflow toolchain. All right, and with that, we will shift to a simple demo showing this stuff being deployed on OpenShift. No actual data science today, more sort of nuts and bolts. So let me hide this. Oops, that too. Okay, so where do I want to start? I want to start here. All right. So on this screen, I have put together a small shell script. This is running commands straight out of the Kubeflow user guide, so there's nothing special here. It doesn't do everything that you can do in launching Kubeflow, but it does sort of the core essentials. So for instance, you can launch metrics on usage and whatnot. I don't have that here. But basically, it is constructing a directory to run in, initializing a project. It sets the Kubeflow version that you want. It sets up the registry so that you can get Kubeflow packages. It installs them. It builds a prototype, sets up some environment variables, and then it deploys the components. And of course, KS stands for KSonnet or KSonnet, and this is the standard workflow. Now, from an OpenShift perspective, if you do this and you haven't done the other bits, you will see, you will see something that looks like this. Everything will be fine, and you'll be trucking along until you get down to this last line. That will talk about the ability, basically not to be able, the lack of ability to edit role bindings. Okay? So the solution is relatively simple. I won't do this live in the interest of time, but here is another little script I put together called user.sh. And I'm running with OC cluster up here for an OpenShift instance. So all I need to do is become the admin user, add cluster admin to the user that I'm using, and switch back. Once that runs, now we will not get that error anymore. So while we're at it, messing around with user settings, the other thing that you need to do, and I called out in the slide, is to change the permissions for some of the service accounts in the project. You can do this easily, again, by just making a little shell script. And so here we modify security contexts so that the Ambassador and Jupyter Hub images run without error in OpenShift. And then we give the TF job operator some extra privileges because it needs to mess around with resources behind the scenes when it launches a TF job. So if we go ahead and actually run that, that is all that takes. And then we should here be able to run KSinit again, and this time we should get to the end without any errors. So we are trucking along there, and that's all it takes. If we check our pod list here, we see that everything is basically running. The dashboard is still coming up. There. Now we're good. Okay, so let's jump over to the browser here. So here's my project that I just created. Let me make that a little bit bigger. You can see all the pods running. And today we'll just go ahead and take a look at the Jupyter Hub. So if we look at our services, we have our Jupyter Hub load balancer here. So we create a route to that, and then we go and visit it, and there is Jupyter Hub. So we will call ourselves Danny, and we will go in and launch a server, use the default settings, and in a second here we should get a notebook. There we go. That was pretty quick. I previously cached this image on my laptop, so we didn't have to wait for it to download the image. And then, of course, from here, you are all set to start running a Jupyter notebook. So you can see this is pretty easy, even with the extra RBAC considerations. It's really simple to set this up on OpenShift. It works just like it works anywhere else. We may be able to iron out some of those privilege things in the future, but it's really not burdensome at all. That's all I've got for you today. Perhaps if it fits with the agenda, we can come back next month or the month after and show you some of the other components and maybe show you some of the 0.2 stuff on OpenShift. So that is it for me.
That would be awesome to have you come back again in another month with a new release and everything.